go ahead and piss on my Mercedes fire, mate, because I think we're back in it, mate, for the title. Sure.
For the title, wow. All right.
You know, Max, even with a dead bird stuck in his grate, can can still win by 8 seconds.
Oh my days! Checo Perez fans were beating the Checo Perez can win this championship drum hard as well. Give me the critical path analysis, Shez. What's happened between then and now? Why Checo Perez was fighting his teammate Max Verstappen then, and is now neck and neck with Fernando Alonso in an ostensibly slower Aston Martin. What's gone on, Shez? Make it make sense, mate. We know that championship seats or seats in championship winning cars are rarer than frankincense and myrrh, right? What you've just posited, Shez, is that if given the opportunity this season or next, probably next, the start of, Alex Albon should reject a seat in Red Bull, replacing Checo Perez because he's having a good time in Williams. Is that what we're saying? Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown. With me as always, my esteemed colleagues, my co-hosts, Shezinho and Baxty B. How are we doing, chaps?
Good. I'm tired.
It doesn't matter if you're tired, Baxty. No, I joke, mate. I echo those sentiments, bruv. But hopefully on the back of a bit of an F1, a cheeky F1 chinwag, we will go to bed less tired, if that even makes sense. No, it doesn't make sense. Go on then, let's talk about some F1. Fresh off the back of the Canadian Grand Prix, which was an interesting one. Mercedes are back, lads, are they not? We can all get happy. I can reach for my Lewis Hamilton cap again. We will be fighting for the championship in the year that is 2023. Or am I lying, Baxty / misinformed, sir?
2023, no chance. 2024, perhaps. It certainly, I think the upgrades are working a lot better than Mercedes were hoping, which is fantastic news. I think Lewis and George both look pretty quick. I don't think there was anything really Lewis could do about Alonso in the Aston. He looked a little bit too quick for Lewis on that particular occasion, though. The lap one battle was great between them, but Red Bull, they're just gone. You know, Max, even with a dead bird stuck in his grate, can can still win by 8 seconds.
Oh my days! Go on then, Shez. Are you go ahead and piss on my Mercedes fire, mate? Because I think we're back in it, mate, for the title. Sure.
For the title, wow. All right. I mean, I hate to pour cold water on your enthusiasm, and well, I'd love to say I think that's probably a little optimistic. And actually, I'd go even further than what Baxty's saying. I think even if by Silverstone, Mercedes have got a car that is equal to the Red Bull, which is, it's not going to happen. But even if they did, I think they are starting to find that the breadth of their deficit isn't just their car. I think there's a few other issues that they need to get on top of that I think they've been quite complacent about before, even in their dominant seasons, and those things are going to start biting them in the bum, so that they're trying to get back to where they were before. I think even if they can get back to where they were before, they'll find that the game has moved on a little bit.
Go on then, mate. So let's deal with, first things first, let's deal with the car and its ills, because I still think there's a couple. Okay, so they've come on from like early season, right? Monaco was a bit of a leap and Barcelona was a bit of a leap. But nevertheless, lads, let's be honest. So I checked, I had a look at brakes analysis, as I tend to. One of the goats in F1. YouTube, the first 8 laps. So you've got to look at this. We can't look at the finishing result and assume that we're comparing apples and apples, right? Because I feel like Max isn't even, what's he pushing the car for, right? Like it's a dominant situation, dominant circumstance. Another lights the flag pretty much. Why would you be pushing that car? So one has to assume that he's not full send on the loud pedal, not for the entire race distance, but early on at Canada, let's say for the first 8 laps, he goes and pulls out 4 seconds over the course of the first 8 laps, which again makes me think of at 10 tenths with all the dials up to 12 on the car. half a second upwards still, lads, in race trim. Half a second, chaps. That's not to be messed about with. But there, I don't want to do the Debbie Downer thing, because there are positives from a Mercedes standpoint to be taken in the fact that potentially the gap to Aston Martin has closed. I can't believe I'm saying that in June of 2023. It sounds like heresy that we're here. But there are positives to be taken, no, Shez, before we go and slander them for their lack of infrastructure.
Yeah, definitely. I think the noises that were coming out from James Allison and co, who was there in Canada, were really positive actually, and they sort of echo what we'd been talking about before, that since going to the new sort of philosophy, even if they can't put everything they want to on the 2023 car, the things that they have put on look like they're doing what the sim and the wind tunnel have told them that they were expecting them to do, and that the upgrades that they're bringing forward, and they've got a plan for those upgrades. Silverstone, I think we're going to see a big one there. Sound like they're going in the right direction to get them to a point where they're going to be sort of challenging Red Bull on pace. That's the expectation, and James Allison was pretty bullish. And yeah, the time seemed to bear them out, but just we still need to be a little bit careful, because although we're really happy about how things finished in Canada and Spain, last year Lewis finished third. This year he finished third, and I know there was a late safety car at the end of the 22 race, but he was 7 seconds behind the leader in Canada last year, and 9. Was it 9 this year? 12 this year? I think it's 12 this year, wasn't it?
Something like that, doesn't matter. But we've lost in the roundings a lot of time behind the race lead. So you're saying then, Shez, it's the gap's gotten bigger or not smaller?
No, I think the Red Bull and the Aston definitely in terms of pure pace at this particular circuit were closer than they were. Red Bull was closer here to the other two teams than it was in Spain, but I think there was a lot to do with the track characteristics and the way that the cars needed to be managed that meant that gap was probably underestimated versus where it actually is.
It's anomalous. They do go well around Barcelona, don't they? The circuit de Catalunya. Go on then, Baxty, talk to me. I thought that was all that we needed to worry about as Sir Lewis and Mercedes fans. Lewis looks like he's got his mojo back. The type of car that you and Shez both talked about, getting it underneath him, a bit of confidence, malleable, enabling him to push at 10/10. It feels like maybe we're not there yet, but it feels like we're getting there soon. So again, my worries and my concerns, my points of contention from a Mercedes fan perspective were dwindling. But Baxter, you mentioned pre-chat that there's something else up. There's a couple of other things that I might be missing. Do tell, Baxty.
So the big one for me, and I know Shez agrees with this as well, is pit stops. I think Mercedes pit stops, certainly last year, and I think a little bit in 2021 as well, have been slack. There was that incident on the first set of pit stops where Lewis was released into the path of Alonso, and you saw Alonso sort of, shall we say, getting himself nominated for an Oscar for how hard he slammed on the brakes and with his steering, and Toto Wolff doing an excellent impression of it as well. But the simple fact is that he had an over 3 second pit stop. And in this current generation of Formula One, that's not acceptable. Red Bull have set the standard every year since 2018. And in the year of 2023, the standard is you've got to go under 2.5 seconds. That's the standard. And Mercedes have done that once this season. That was in Bahrain. So ever since then, they've been over 2.5 seconds. If they go that sort of 7/10 quicker on their pit stops, Lewis isn't anywhere near Alonso, and you don't have that incident. And also I want to say on record, I thought Lewis was lucky not to get a penalty for that, because that for me was a slam dunk, unsafe release. It's similarly, Lando Norris as well got away with one. I said after the race, I said that it was consistently stewarded, but it has gone against every single historical precedent we've seen in the last 15, 20 years. And in terms of unsafe releases, in previous years, that's a 5-second penalty every day of the week. But on this occasion, they got away with one, which, great for us as Lewis fans, but I was surprised to see that. But yeah, Mercedes pit stops have been poor. They have been poor, and they need to up their game. Red Bull are just so strong. It's consistency, and all about process. Shez's favorite word, process. But that's what they do. They're getting it under 2.5 seconds almost every single race.
Oh, Baxty, you're becoming a bit of a Red Bull fanboy, ain't you? And what's all this?
Behave. Behave.
And all this talk about safety concerns. Safety. Let them race, lads. Safety be damned. Unsafe release. What is that? Shez, chime in on that, bro, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, so I obviously agree with everything that Baxty just said. I mean, that pit stop, Lewis's pit stop was nearly a second longer than Fernando's. That's part of the game here is optimizing everything. And this goes back to something that I thought was a problem last season as well. Mercedes have been used to for so long now having a car that's dominant enough that they can just head off into the distance. And what they didn't do when they were in that phase of dominance was that because they had the car, they left everything else as safe as possible. So it meant that pit stops were always a little bit longer to be safe. And the strategy was always, all right, let's be safe and protect our lead. And in that time, when everybody else was chasing, Red Bull were honing all of the things that they could do to get as close as possible. So that's why pit stops were absolutely pin sharp. Their strategy, I mean, Cameron, you always go on about how good they are around safety cars and making the right decisions about safety cars and tires and things. That came from a
underdog mentality.
Exactly. They have to maximize every opportunity they can get. But the thing is that now that they're in a dominant position, they haven't slacked off of that. They've kept it going. So their strategy is top notch. Their pit stops are top notch. So when I say that Mercedes are trying to get back to where they were before, I don't think that is enough. I think having a car that is equal to a Red Bull isn't enough anymore. And I think I agree that the pit stops that they're doing at the moment aren't acceptable, but it's a symptom of a wider problem. And I think what Mercedes need to be doing is they need to use the time that they've got where they're not the fastest car to make everything else as brilliant as possible. So their pit stops need to be the quickest on the grid. Their strategy needs to be the best on the grid. All of those things need to be as pin sharp as they can be. One, to maximize the opportunities that they have this season and next, but also that when the time comes when they're properly competing for a title, they're not letting points slip because of dodgy pit stops and dodgy strategy. Because that's what Red Bull have done, and they're reaping the rewards now.
Oh, Shez, I agree with your diagnosis. Sadly, mate, no pun intended, but it feels a bit. I feel like is rain still wet, lads? I feel like we've been having this conversation for the best part of 18 months now, right? Even the unsafe release, it reminds me instantly of Monza 2021. And how long ago was that, lads? 2 years or they've been doing these for the longest time. And I don't want to get on my Mercedes Debbie Downer horse, but they leave me with no option. Just when I thought it was out, they bring me back in.
Well, Cameron, it's not about like doing a Debbie Downer on them. Like, they're still one of the top 4 teams in Formula One right now. And things could be a lot worse, and they're making some good decisions, but there's always room for improvement. And if you can see where those avenues are, I see that as a good thing. That if you can see exactly what it is you can improve, what you need to improve, you can start to make strategies to get there. And I think at some point Red Bull are going to run into the law of diminishing returns, right? That the improvements that they can make are going to get increasingly more marginal, whereas the teams behind them have got more to make up, and there's more low-hanging fruit for them to reach for. if Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston don't pick up those cues and don't start making progress in down those avenues where they can, that's a problem. But right now, at least we know that there are things that they can improve on.
You're a glass half full type of guy, Shez, and that's why I love you, bruv. And again, I don't want to get onto my Debbie Downer. Go for it, Baxty.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Shez just said there, that it's not just on Mercedes that need to improve. I mean, Ferrari on pit stops this year are one of the quickest. I think, obviously they've got the DHL Fastest Pit Award, which is an award that's been going since 2015. And Ferrari I was in the first 2 rounds this year, they were quick. They were the quickest. And they're right up there with Red Bull every single race.
From a pit stop perspective, yeah.
Yeah, from a pit stop perspective, they're right up there. Almost certainly 9 times out of 10, they'll be under 2.5. They might have the odd dodgy one, but
because they went away and got their reps in, didn't they? Baxty, 1,000 practice pit stops before season kicked off. I mean, bloody Nora.
But Ferrari have got different issues that they need to address. Every one of these teams has got a different thing that they need to.
But
that they need
absolutely,
to improve on.
brother. They're you might want to argue that their problems are more numerate than Mercedes and Aston Martin right now.
What I will say about Mercedes is that in the early period of their domination, their pit stops were very, very fast. I mean, they actually won the pit stop award in 2017. And, that year, of course, they had to be quick because they were up against Ferrari and Vettel, and, they needed to be on it. But I think since then, that's when the drop in quality has come. I think particularly around sort of 2019, 2020, when Mercedes were just that much quicker than everybody else. We started to see the cracks come in with, the failure to tell Lewis about the pit lane being closed in Monza in 2020, and then slow pit stops, and not necessarily doing things the right way. That's when I think things started to slide just a tiny bit for Mercedes. But Red Bull have taken the standard that Mercedes set, and I actually think they furthered it.
100%.
Meticulous excellence of execution.
100%. But let this not become a Red Bull kumbaya. I feel like we've given them enough praise.
And that's enough flowers.
And back patting. Let's talk about their Achilles heel potentially, chaps. What is going on with a Mexican called Checo Perez? What is going on, lads? Because it feels like only let's say 3 or 4 races back, Checo Perez fans were beating the Checo Perez can win this championship drum hard as well. Give me the critical path analysis, Shez. What's happened between then and now? Why Checo Perez was fighting his teammate Max Verstappen then, and is now neck and neck with Fernando Alonso in an ostensibly slower Aston Martin. What's gone on, Shez? Make it make sense, mate.
Oh, poor Sergio. But I think with Checo, it's a combo of his underlying pace, sort of what he can actually absolutely get out of that car, maybe any car, versus Max Verstappen. And then on top of that, there's a mental attitude issue where he's I think he's trying to overreach. So his qualifying performances have been the main problem, which is why he ends up in the races trying to fight through the field. But the last 3 races, he's not even got through to quali 3, right, in a car that is dominating the season.
And that's chaos, mate.
Right. So, but every one of them, Spain, it was an off in quali 2. In Monaco, it was the crash at Sainte Devote into term in quali 1. And then what was the race before that?
Before Monaco.
Yeah, was it
Miami?
Was it Miami?
I think it was Miami.
Miami was the last race where he made it count, right? And
Max what count? Oh, you're talking about quali still.
Quali, yeah.
Yeah, he got poled, didn't he? Yeah.
But then what happened after that, lads? I think that might be his worst display of the year.
But I think that kind of performance is what's put him where he is at the moment, where Max has come from 9th and demolished him. And he's like, what do I do about this? And that's set up him trying to overreach with the car and do things that he is not able to do, and is meant that he's making big mistakes. And that's what that crash in quali 1 in Monaco was all about, right? Was him trying to do more than what the car was able to do in a bid to try and get on terms with a driver that he can't get on terms with.
And Shez, that's chaos. If what I'm hearing is right, which is kind of what you just alluded to, that Checo is looking at Max Verstappen's telemetry and thinking that he can replicate that style around these. That's not what you want to be doing, Checo. You're a real limited specialist, a street king, a street fighter of a driver. Get in your bag, Checo Perez, to stop trying to duplicate Max. That surely is a hiding.
But a lot of it is him needing to, as you say, Cameron, get out of his own head and just sort of take a step back and go, okay, I'm not performing at my best. Do I need to replicate Max? No, I just need to do what I can and get the most out of the car, because at the moment I'm not even doing that.
Unbelievable, Shez. How the mighty have fallen, right? This is incredible. Baxty, answer me this question, sir, and I'm gonna pitch it at you this way. Do Red Bull have a problem, have a fire that they need to put out in Checo Perez's underperformance? And when I say fire that they need to put out, how soon, if it is indeed a fire that they need to put out, how soon will they need to look at putting it out in Checo?
Without looking too closely at the World Championship standings right now, I don't think right now, I think they have enough trust in him and his second place is secure enough.
9 points is the diff between him and Fernie.
Is it 9 now? Okay, now, right. Okay, well, if it's 9 points, they need to up their game because, they want that 1-2 in the World Championship. We know Horner was desperate for it last year, and then the whole Max douchebag moment in Brazil happened. They've never had a 1-2 finish in the drivers, and that for them has to be minimum this year with the car that they have. I mean, look, Checo is underperforming. He's been donkey of the day last 3 races. I know Ferrari had a very quick race car in Canada. I know some analysis has suggested they had the quickest race car. I'm not so sure about that, but he couldn't get anywhere near those Ferraris. Couldn't get anywhere near them. That's not acceptable for somebody driving the quickest car on the grid. If that was Bottas, he would have been absolutely destroyed left, right, and centre. And it's literally from Monaco, boom, boom, boom. Whereas it's taken 3 races for us to kind of go, Checo Perez is having a shocker here. He's got to be qualifying Q3 almost every time. He should be in the top 4 realistically every single race. And he's not delivering, and it's not acceptable in a World Championship winning team, in a World Championship leading team, to be performing like that. They have a big stick with which to beat him with, and it's called Daniel Ricciardo. And Danny is starting to make himself more visible again.
True.
Could they pull the trigger on that? I doubt it, but
I don't think. Oh, do I regurgitate? So I was listening to a podcast from a internationally syndicated broadcaster, and they speculated that the suspect most likely for that seat is not the Honey Badger. It is Mr. Alex Albon, still with links to tenuous links to Red Bull, but on the back of the bloody drive that he put down at Canada, finishing 1 place behind Checo Perez in a bloody Williams, chaps. If you wanted to raise a flag and say, look at me, have you got a seat, potentially put me in there after Checo? Shez, you're not buying it, mate.
No, in terms of, I think that would be a terrible move for Alex Albon. I think he's found himself a nice little groove at Williams. He's in a position where he's a team leader. All of the updates for that car went on his car, and he was able to parlay that into an excellent. He was driver of the day for me on Sunday.
Absolutely,
right. But what he doesn't want to do is end up back at Red Bull where he's playing second fiddle to Max in a car that he's not used to, and that seat is a cursed seat. I think even if Daniel Ricciardo comes back and is in that seat, he'll be really happy to be in the seat, but he's not going to be beating Max Verstappen. I think that time has gone for Danny Rick. This team is too centered around Max, and why wouldn't they be? The car they've got is quick in his hands because he knows what to do to get the best out of it, and that makes it a dominant car. Checo just isn't able to unlock the same potential that's in that car. And the problem for Checo is that it's very obvious what the absolute potential of that car is, because the other guy's doing it every week.
This is true. Oh my gosh. Ever disparaged. How dare you disrespect the Mexican Minister of Defense like that, Shez? It's oh no, brother, it is what it is though at this stage. It is what it is at this stage. I'd oh, can I counter this, Shez? When is the right time for Alex Albon then, if not now? Okay, so what you're saying, let me crystallize what you're saying, Shez, because this is techie. We know that championship seats or seats in championship winning cars are rarer than frankincense and myrrh, right? What you've just posited, Shez, is that if given the opportunity this season or next, probably next, the start of, Alex Albon should reject a seat in Red Bull, replacing Checo Perez because he's having a good time in Williams. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you want to keep your stock high, you don't go up against Max Verstappen in a Red Bull right now. And actually,
I don't know, Shez, you've got to back yourself sometimes. It might
be
impossible.
But there's backing yourself, and there's setting yourself up for a fall, which is what I think is that would be the flip, the sort of corollary to this for me is what is happening in the background with all of these teams, right? The amount of investment that's going in, and the fact that the cost cap and the ATR will eventually level things out a little bit more. I still think that's what will happen.
But will it though?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and I think that Williams are actively becoming an upwardly mobile team with the hires that they're making.
Have you seen their floor, Shez?
Yeah, that's really short-sighted though, man. Like that's looking at what is in 2023. Like, did Ferrari in 1996 have a car that was going to win the title then? No. Did Michael Schumacher go on and win 5 titles in that team? Yes. It's about process, as always. And if they can bring the right processes to that team, the appearance of the car and the complexity of what it can do in its performance is a function of the team that builds it. And if that team improves and has the environment and the conditions to allow that to happen, then there's no reason to think that what has happened to Aston Martin this season can't happen to Williams in 5 years' time. And Alex is young enough.
That's a stretch, man. That's I think I was with you there all the way, Shez, until you said what happened to you parlayed Aston Martin's trajectory onto Williams over then.
Tell me why that. Tell me why not.
Like you said, personnel is key, right? If they sign the proper personnel.
Yeah. But that's all part and parcel of that.
Big if, right, though, Shez. If they sign going forward, the key personnel.
I think that's a big if for every team. Sure, they could go backwards. They could absolutely go backwards. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but it's also possible that with an intelligent team principle and a good process for hiring and improving like their processes, which is a problem for them at the moment. It has been as part of their underinvestment for years now.
You might
F1 currently, I think, has the conditions in which a team like that can make progress. And I don't think it's completely unreasonable for a driver like Alex to bank on that. It's the same thing that Lando Norris is doing at McLaren right now.
How's that going, mate?
Sure. But that's just an example of a team not understanding what it is they need. And I don't think anyone really on the grid understands exactly what they need, other than Red Bull, and they've got the magic bullet in their team.
Mr. Newey, this is the thing. I was just talking to a friend of the channel, Peter Windsor, and he said, the question was, as we tangent onto Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, the question was, if there were one driver that you could take across to Ferrari to cure for their infrastructure, operation and strategic ills, which one would you do? Peter Windsor's answer, well, it's more than that you need. There's not one driver. They've got Charles Leclerc and he's plenty quick enough. Exactly. If there were a silver bullet, it would be a 2-parted silver bullet, and one part would be Max Verstappen and the other part would be Adrian Newey. That would be your panacea.
But also I was thinking about this as well the other day. I'm really sorry because this is a really fun tangent for me. I'm sorry to hijack. You can tell me to shut up if you want me to. But I was thinking about this as well, that Adrian Newey has been courted by Ferrari so many times. If I was to ask you guys, what would happen if Adrian Newey today went to Ferrari? What do we think that in 2024 they'll be winning a title?
Nah, I agree with Baxty. I don't think. I think a lot of depending on who you talk to, don't want to out people's secrets here, but depending on who you talk to and how close they are to the paddock, some will say that Newey's a genius, and given a long enough timeline, he's going to smash you out. Given a long enough timeline and sufficient budget, and for sprinkle in their new rules and regs, you kind of Newey's. Newey's apex predator. However, you talk to some other people, Shez, and they will tell you that Newey is a bit of a show pony, and that he has been a bit of a show pony. He is he's the quarterback of the operation, but like the genius bits that we're talking about, like the aggressive undercut, the floor, the anti-dive, the front but all these other things are incepted and ideated through people that aren't Newey all the time.
Yeah, but that's not Newey's role, man. Like this is definitely plagiarizing from another podcast, but this is a shame this has come out before. But the role of a team of a chief technical officer isn't to design the entire car and come up with every idea. That isn't how it works. The days of a John Barnard, coming up with, right, we're going to use a carbon fiber monocoque, or we're going to come up with a semi-automatic gearbox, and it's me in charge of everything, and everything has to go through me. That time is gone now. There's too many facets to designing a car for that to be true.
So that's the point they're making. Then shows that.
What Adrian Newey brings is that you might have like blue sky thinking and data-driven ideas, but he's the guy that has been there for 40 years that can say, okay, I see what your data is saying, but this is what I think intuitively is going to work best. And that's what a team like Mercedes really, really lacked coming into this season, coming into this rule set, is that they had a guy like Mike Elliott that was all about the blue sky thinking, but there was nobody to temper that with intuition.
PTSD.
We've talked about this so many times, right? But that's the problem. But the problem that every team will have, that Red Bull will have as well, is that when Newey retires, because it's going to happen. He's even said it, that realistically, the talk of retirement is realistic now. That timeline has started. What happens when he goes? The Red Bull have a robust enough structure underneath Newey that intuition isn't lost. And I don't know. Does anyone know?
Baxty, do you know, mate?
I don't know, but what I would say is I think part of the genius of the Red Bull team is that Newey has kind of cultivated a team around him that he trusts 1,000%. And it's when you see people move, the likes of Dan Fallow to Aston Martin, Newey knows what he's letting go. He knows he's letting go somebody that he's essentially trained and sort of sculpted in his way of thinking, but it's almost like he's happy to let them go in a certain respect. But he will likely have set that technical department up to work in his system, regardless of whether he's there or not. Now, yes, you are losing the ultimate genius in Adrian Newey, and there probably will be some kind of knockback on that. I mean, Shez raised Mercedes. James Allison stepped away, and look where it got us. James Allison is the only equivalent to Adrian Newey, and that's comparing apples and oranges. They're very different. I mean, Allison is light years behind Newey in terms of accomplishment and what he understands, but he's still very, very good. And I think, Mercedes had to bring him away from the Ineos America's Cup project, and he's already bringing success to the car with his understanding and his mindset as well. So, you can understand it, that you probably trust Red Bull to get it right, but just look at Mercedes as a cautionary tale as to what can go wrong.
But I think I think somebody like Fallows or Marshall, them leaving isn't about them bringing like technical nous. It's not them going, right, I've got a genius idea that's gonna make us 3 seconds quicker than the competition. It's about it's again about being able to bring a structure to the team that allows ideas to flow, and the correct ideas to then be put on the car, and that then creates the performance.
More pertinent, shows the worst ideas to be vetoed. I think that's the more salient one that Mercedes have been lacking.
But that's all part of it, though, isn't it?
I think that's the foundational part of it. That's the piece that money can't buy. That's what Mercedes lack at the moment and have been lacking for the past 16 months, and ultimately why we're here still circa half a second shy of the race lead. But I digress. I don't want to do the Mercedes thing because my PTSD is flaring up, lads. Talk to me about Ferrari before we get onto warmer climes in Lewis. Ferrari are dropping the ball, and this comes from somebody who thought Ferrari were going to go well this year. I've got to confess, What is it? Bonkers, Shez? I drank the Kool-Aid. Baxty, let me ask you the question in this way. Is there anything that Charles Leclerc can do if let's assume he chooses to stay at Scuderia Ferrari? What can Charles do internally to solve for some of these ills? Again, going back to the question that I pitched at friend of the channel, Peter Windsor, or is he on a hiding to nothing?
I think personally, from his perspective, and I think it's the same for Carlos Sainz as well, they're on an absolute hiding to nothing because, Ferrari have got the drivers. They've got 2 brilliant drivers capable of fighting for a world championship on front. Charles, you would assume, is the lead guy. He's going to be fighting Max. And then you'd probably have Carlos behind fighting Checo and trying to sort of keep Checo away from stopping Charles type thing. Where Ferrari's issues is, and we've spoken about this at great length as well, is in the technical department, is in strategy. And there's not a lot that Charles Leclerc can do. He's not the one hiring and firing. This is where it falls on Fred Vasseur. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Sky did a really good interview with Fred before the Canadian Grand Prix. Rachel Brooks went and had a good chat with him, and she asked him the question up front. He said, look, we're seeing all these people move to Aston Martin. We're seeing Rob Marshall go to McLaren. Where are these Ferrari signings? And he said something. He said, look, a lot of people are making noise now. I suspect you might be hearing from us soon. So I think Ferrari are definitely starting to make some moves. We're just not hearing about them yet. Because, of course, they've just lost a couple of key people as well. They're losing Laura Mecchi to AlphaTauri.
David Sanchez,
Sanchez to McLaren as well. So, Ferrari need to start recruiting the right people. And maybe Fred Vasseur has had enough time now to see where he needs to recruit, who he needs to recruit. And, that's the key for Ferrari. In terms of the right recruitment, they've already got it in the drivers. And this made the whole Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari thing earlier, when we had that sort of a week of is he going to go, is he not type discourse. That was what made it so stupid, because it was like, well, hang on. Lewis is the last person you need to bring in to work into this well-oiled machine, not now when he's going to be trundling along in the midfield like he is now. He's not going to improve anything. So I think that's Charles Leclerc can sit it out and wait and continue to improve. We know that Ferrari was quick in Canada, as I said earlier, but I don't think anything. Circling back to the question, there's nothing he personally can do. It needs to be on Fred Vasseur.
So Baxty, I'm like 95% of the way there with you, what you just said, but I still what troubles me and frustrates me to a certain extent, given how well and highly we all think of Charles Leclerc as a peddler, incredible, right? Pole sitter settings, Mr. Saturday, and all that. I'm watching quali play out and the pace that Scuderia Ferrari absolutely had on Saturday. Watching the way that played out, I was like, well, all right, chalk that up to the game. That's another Ferrari mistake, being on the wrong tyres at the wrong time, etc., etc. Cool, whatever. Chalk that up to Ferrari. Rain is still wet, whatever. But then Charles does one of these ones where I hear him afterwards over the pit radio saying, well, we knew slicks were the tyres to be on. Why weren't we on slicks at that time? I'm like, hold on. And I pitched this to Peter. I was like, hold on. If you knew, Charles, if you knew, I don't want to say the buck stops with Charles, that's too far. But if you knew, then make this make sense. Where's the gap analysis? If you knew, Charles, then how did you end up out there at a time when slicks were apex predator, yeah, and that could have got you a second or a first in Q2. Why weren't you on there, Charles? If you knew, you've just given away the game, right? You said that you knew, but you weren't on them. How, Shez? I don't understand it, mate.
But this is a 2-bit answer, right? The first thing is that in real time he did ask for the dry tires.
So why didn't he have them?
And was told immediately no, put in a banker lap.
What?
So he said it, and he said it fairly forcefully. And remember, I sent you a little quote from him afterwards saying that there wasn't anything more I could have done to get the right tires on my car. But the second thing is that apart from Alex Albon, there wasn't anybody else in quali 2 that was on slicks. So
cool, but that's the
there was a nice little thread from Blake about this one, where he said, okay, well, Charles is complaining about this. That he wasn't on the right tyres, but his teammate was able to get through on the inters, and Charles was 2 tenths behind him, and that cost him a place in Q3. So is there something about, like, Charles complaining, but actually did he underperform just inherently in that car in Q2 to mean that he didn't get through, given that everybody else did what he did?
Bro, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sick and tired of it, Shez. I'll be honest with you, man. I don't want to hear any more. Not that specifically. The mistakes. Here's this, Shez. The mistakes and crashing into the wall and whatever of consequence. And even Ferrari's mishaps to an extent, I think they're all forgivable. But if you know that slicks at that time, if you had the wherewithal and the race savvy to know that now was the time to be on slicks, yet you allowed the team, especially because the context hit, you allowed the team to push back on you and convince you otherwise, especially Shez. Because if that's a one-off, say if you're at Merck and you're Lewis and, I don't know, it's Imola 2022 or whatever, or 2021 even, and they make him whatever, cool. There is even in that instance, there is still a bit of a precedent. But precedent, if you're talking about precedent for mistakes and mishaps as far as strategic gaffes are concerned, Ferrari take the biscuit, Shez. Brazil last year, there's been a gazillion of them, right? They make mistakes pretty much every single race. Charles has to own up to it. He's got to take some of the blame here, Shez. I'm not having it anymore.
So I just want to play that scenario forward a little bit, right? So let's say Charles says, right, I want to come in for slicks. Ferrari say, no, absolutely not. Stay out, put your banker lap in. Charles says, no, I don't care. I'm coming in. I don't care what you're saying. I'm going to come into the pit lane. They have an argument all the way around the lap, and Charles comes in against everything that Ferrari have just said. He comes in, they faff around because they don't have his tyres, because they're like, we didn't want you to come in. We don't want to put slicks on your car. They eventually put slicks on his car. The rain has intensified and he's missed his moment anyway. So I don't think in that situation there was anything more he could have done. He can say, I want to have slicks on my car right now. I am coming into the pit lane. If Ferrari are still sitting, if the pit wall is still saying to him, no, we don't want you to come in, I'm not sure how much more forceful, other than just driving into the pit lane and surprising your pit team, he can do. But if he does that, he loses the element of them being able to put the tyres on. And then the rain comes down and he loses his window anyway.
So this is the problem, right, Baxty? There is, if you don't, like with any good relationship, in or out of F1, right? If you don't have trust, if you don't empower your prime assets in a GOAT driver, and we can all agree that by all accounts in Charles Leclerc, if you're not empowering him to make these decisions, even if sometimes they are wrong, you're losing, maybe not a tenth, but you're taking away something from one of the best drivers on the grid, no, Baxty? Surely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, if it was Lewis or Max or George or Fernando, if they'd said we need slicks, they probably would have gone, okay, yeah, we trust you. Okay. Whereas Ferrari, still like a bit like mother knows best type attitude in a way. Like, it's like we know best, and no, Inter's the right thing. I agree with what Shez was saying. I think the best time to go on the slicks was at the start of Q2, which is what Alex Albon did. But I think, what Charles Leclerc really, should have done better on his inters, and he didn't. But look at what he said after qualifying. He said Ferrari are holding us back.
Oh my God.
Like, he was not happy with Ferrari at all. The BBC did a big article about it. Thankfully they made up for it in the race by having a very good race by their standards. I actually watched the race with a Ferrari fan, and he was absolutely delighted with that.
It's a good strategy, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, but Baxty, is that not just Mercedes Brazil 2022? Is that not just flattering to deceive for the ills that clearly aren't being fixed? Because to a point that you've made, Baxty, and you made it very succinctly and eloquently, that it feels like it's almost like a teacher-student relationship that Ferrari have with the guy who everybody says is the quickest driver in that red car, to the point where, and again, Pete, I'm plagiarising massively from Mr. Windsor here, to the point where over the radio, they're having a conversation mid-race with Charles. It's not dissimilar to the one that Alonso and Stroll have been having, where they're saying that science isn't going to attack you. What are we doing it? And what Peter said, again, in his infinite wisdom, is that what that smacks of is a chat that they've had prior, right? They've had this conversation in a debrief. There's no way that just comes up sporadically, just randomly, like, do you know what I mean? They've definitely had a conversation. And again, all of this is God tier levels worth of undermining your best bloody driver. You can't have Michael Schumacher and not give that driver Michael Schumacher levels of support, right? He's no longer Michael Schumacher, then, is he, Shez?
But this comes back to what you were saying before, because you asked what can Charles Leclerc do? I would say that this isn't a Charles Leclerc issue. This is still a Ferrari issue. This is still Ferrari holding back their driver, not their driver holding his team back or whatever. It's not that. And just to build on that a little bit, the more this happens, the more I worry that Fred Vasseur might want to hire whoever he wants, but people might not want to come, because if they see that's what the environment is like at Ferrari, they might say, all right, we can ply our trade elsewhere.
Why would you? Well,
right?
They can't even get it right with Charles Leclerc.
And then it just
the best free drivers.
It just turns into a vicious cycle. And that's why actually the best thing that Charles Leclerc can do in the short term, unfortunately, Ferrari fans, is to find another team.
To sack it off. But where would he go, bruv? I suppose the swaps it with Lewis once Lewis hangs up his Nomex, bloody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best.
There's just another thing that Fred Vasseur was talking about. He said one of the issues that Ferrari have with recruiting is purely geography. The UK is such a hub for Formula One. They have 6-7 teams based here in some capacity, and to go to Ferrari, you have to relocate to Italy. Whereas if you go from Red Bull to Mercedes or Red Bull to Aston Martin, or whichever way you go, you can stay where you are, or you can relocate slightly closer to Woking if you move to McLaren or something. It's a shorter move rather than completely packing up your life and flying to another country into a culture that you don't know, and working in a very different environment to what the other F1 teams have. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that Ferrari have with recruitment.
So my counter to that is that Audi are setting up in Switzerland, and they've taken Andreas Seidel, and they've got James Key coming over.
Yeah.
So geography isn't everything. I think culture plays a much bigger part.
Mm-hmm.
Ross Brawn was happy to relocate his entire life in '96 to Maranello.
Yeah.
To unleash the potential that is within Ferrari. That potential is still there. They have all the key ingredients to make it a success, but the culture doesn't allow them to do that. And I think geography can be overcome if you can show that you have a culture that allows people to excel and make the most. But at the moment, people there are scared for their careers and they're wasting their careers there, and that's why I think they might struggle to bring people over.
Oh, this is chaos, lads. This has been like the bad news podcast.
Sorry.
Why Ferrari are rubbish. Why Mercedes will never win another championship ever again. Let's end on some good news, because I feel like...
No, but that's not what we said.
Well,
No,
yes.
no.
Never let the truth get in the way of a good story, gentlemen. I will say that. Let's end on some good news, because it seems like the goatiest of F1 goats, a chap called Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton of Stevenage. Don't know him. Baxty's like,
No, I never heard of him. No.
He's that fella.
No.
I hear he's quite good behind a
Really?
steering
I'll have to
wheel.
check him out.
Okay, let's talk about Lewis for a second, because I feel like there was somebody called Chezinho on a podcast not too many moons ago who said that once Sir Lewis gets his wheels underneath him, gets around him a car that he can trust and push and drive at 10 tenths, then he's going to have his way with George Russell. To that, I said, you're talking rubbish, Shez. I don't know what you've been drinking. I think George might muller him over the course of this season. I would put my mortgage on it. And since, Shez, apparently, mate, you might have been proved... Yeah, apparently you know something about F1, don't you, Shez? It's not all bluster and clinical terms.
I think it's still early, but the omens are good, aren't they? He's leveled up the qualifying head to head, and he's 6-2 up in the races. Okay, granted with a couple of retirements on George's side, but look, I really like George, but I think Lewis is now really starting to show that there's a bit of a step between himself and George in the other car. And you know, I don't want to overplay it too much, but the mistake he had in Canada really felt like a guy that was trying to keep up with the guy in front of him,
overdriving a tad,
just a little bit, right? And you know, that I think is quite telling given where we were at the beginning of the season, and you have to kind of say that Lewis never gets to a point where he overdrives the car. He'll finish where he thinks he can finish, and then afterwards he'll start to sort of drive the technical team and drive the strategy team and go, what could we have done better? What could we improve next time out? And that's the iterative improvement that you're seeing, to the point where the technical team are really listening to what he wants, and he's now got a car that he can push as hard as he possibly can, and it's showing improvements. The slight caveat to all of this is that we're talking about Barcelona and Canada, two races where both Mercedes and Lewis in particular performs really well. If George had turned up in Canada and blown Lewis out of the water, I'd have said that something was amiss here. So I think we still need a bigger sample set, but I think the trend is starting to be established now.
Oof. To that you say what, Baxty? Agree, disagree, or other?
Can't disagree. I'm going to bring my analyst of the year 2022, Ted Kravitz, into this conversation. But he gave a really good sort of analogy of where he thinks Lewis is. He said Lewis has been a wounded lion since Abu Dhabi 21. And then the car's crap and everything else. And he's been very slowly recharging his batteries to gear himself up for one last go at the 8th title. And I think we are starting to see Lewis get back to his previous best. He trusts the car underneath him. I know Mercedes still aren't happy with the rear, and Lewis isn't happy with the rear of the car. But yeah, he said in the cool down room afterwards, he said, oh, you know, Max's rear is ridiculous. You know,
that gets you in trouble in places. You know?
Yeah, phrasing. Yeah. You know, he's getting back to his best and he feels comfortable. And I think if Mercedes get that car right, you know, Red Bull needs to be careful. Mercedes are coming for them. And I think Christian and Helmut know that the team they're worried about the most is not Ferrari, it's Mercedes. And with James Allison back in play, Lewis getting back to his best, it's a good time to be a Mercedes fan.
Well, here's hoping, Baxty. Here is hoping, bro, because I want to see some racing. Mr. Windsor Mr. Windsor cursed me out this morning or yesterday morning even saying, Cameron, what are you on about? F1 is deeper and more complex than that. Sack off all the push to pass overtaking. It's, what did he say? I'm going to try and quote him here. It's big business. It's the biggest budgets that you'll ever see in sports. I want to see Lewis take off his helmet and complain about not having the stability that the Red Bull has. There's story in this, and it doesn't always need to be racing for first and second place.
Yeah, that's why Canada was so absorbing.
He was talking your language, Shez.
Right? And did you not take out that okay, like Red Bull are miles ahead, but actually Aston and Mercedes are locked in a really, really interesting battle.
True.
And actually, and I know you're all about automotive pugilism for the first step of the. Yeah, I get that. But the more that these three teams, and I include Ferrari in this because qualifying dramas aside, actually their race was pretty good and they did show some pace. These three teams pushing themselves along will eventually, when they start to find those low-hanging fruits and start to really chow down on what they can do, they've got the resources to get to Red Bull level, and then we'll start to see it. And there is a potential here for a 4-team, at least three ex-world champions and Charles Leclerc battling it out. But stuff needs to happen before we get there. But the potential is there. And that's why I'm really enthused about this rule set, the technical regs, the sporting regs. I can see it happening, even if we're not seeing it right now.
2010 redo, that would be amazing.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
Yeah, that would be spectacular.
And you can replace Seb Vettel with Max Verstappen. Now that's a proper battle.
Four drivers last race of the season going for the title. That was something. Even if Lewis had no chance of winning the title that weekend, he was still there.
Competition for the world champs. What else are we watching for, lads? Yeah. I don't want to comb through for the menial subplots. I want to see but
the Fernando Lewis subplot wasn't menial, man. That was
but I want to see that for first and throw Max Verstappen, mate.
It'll happen, man. It will happen one day. You'll see it. I just don't want it to be. I just don't want it to be 2026 when that happens, and Aston have had to limp along with the Mercedes engine.
This is what this was my counter back to Peter. That by the time, if to your point, Shez, we do have to wait until 2026 to see that 25% of the Drive to Survive population won't even be watching any longer, Shez. That's the problem. That is the point. And I completely agree with Peter that there's more nuance and I don't know, devil and finesse to F1 than just the blood and guts for first and second. There is. He talked about, I want to see Zach Brown pitching McLaren to PepsiCo sponsors and all. There is absolutely loads of other things.
That's Peter's previous marketing marketing background, isn't it? But Cameron, that's why they need. And maybe this is getting a bit too big for my boots, but that's why they need podcasts like us and Quick Stop and all the others that are doing things like this, because I think we bring the enthusiasm for the subplots and the stories that aren't always the front of the grid, that aren't always the top step. When there's a season like we're having right now, we've still got an hour's worth of content to talk about.
Very well said, Shez. Very well said. We are doing F1's job for F1. Hold on.
Indeed.
I feel like that should come with a paycheck somewhere. But anyway, I digress. On that bombshell, chaps, let's wrap. Thank you so much for my co-host at ShezMed on Twitter. Shez, thank you so much for co-host. Baxty at BaxtyB on Twitter. BaxtyB for some of the best F1 content on all of the YouTubes. I've been your boy Cameron F1. Do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, do me a favor, scroll right to the top and drop us a 5-star review. We'll be back same time, same place next week. As always, do me a favor between now and then. Hug somebody that you love and look, but never stir. Peace.